The Vexthax clan spectacular failure note. Let me tell you about the day the Vexthax clan made what historians would later call the single dumbest decision in galactic history. And trust me, that's saying something. In a universe where the Zor-Blaxians once tried to weaponize black holes, the Vexthax considered themselves the apex predators of known space. Picture 8 ft tall lizard bears with too many teeth, and an ego problem that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Their leader, Krax the Bone Browner, had collected trophies from over 200 different species. His lieutenant, Zog, the Mind Flayer, wasn't much better. These guys made professional wrestlers look humble. They were cruising through the Outer Rim territories in their ship, the Screaming Death, because apparently subtlety wasn't their strong suit, when their sensors picked up a small human transport vessel. Now, humans had only recently joined the galactic community, and most species still thought of them as those weird pink things from the backwater spiral arm who somehow invented faster-than-light travel using duct tape and sheer bloody-mindedness. "Look, Zog," Krax rumbled, his voice like grinding stone mixed with the garbage disposal. "Soft, pink, weaklings. Perfect for trophy hunting." Zog's 4 eyes gleamed with what passed for intelligence among his species. "But, Krax, the humans travel in family units. If we take one, the others will come looking." "Exactly." Krax slammed his massive fist on the command console, probably breaking something expensive. "We take their cub as bait. When the adults come to rescue it, we hunt them properly. Show the galaxy what real predators can do." So, they fired a few warning shots, disabled the human ship's engines, and boarded with all the ceremony their warrior culture demanded, which is to say, lots of roaring and weapon waving. What they found was a family of 3 returning from a vacation on Kepler Station. The parents, Maria and Jack Martinez, fought like cornered animals to protect their 8-year-old son, Tommy. But hey, 2 humans against a dozen Vexthax warriors. The math wasn't exactly complicated. The funny thing was, little Tommy didn't cry or scream like most species cubs would. He just watched everything with those wide brown eyes, taking in every detail. The weapons, the ship layout, the way the aliens moved and communicated. The kid was quiet, but he was paying attention. "Please," Maria Martinez begged, as they dragged Tommy away. "He's just a child. Take me instead." Krax laughed, a sound like an avalanche. "Having a bad day. Your cub will make excellent bait, soft skin. When you come for him, we will add your bones to our trophy wall. You have 3 standard galactic days," Zog added helpfully. "After that, we start our traditional pre-hunt rituals. Trust me, you don't want to know what those involve." And with that bit of completely unnecessary villain exposition, they sealed the airlocks and left the disabled transport ship drifting in space. Tommy Martinez, meanwhile, was getting the grand tour of the Screaming Death. The Vexthax seemed to think terrorizing an 8-year-old was a peak intimidating tactic. They showed him their weapons collection, their trophy room full of bones from various species, and their combat training arena where they practiced dismembering things. Scared now? "Oh, pink grub." Krax loomed over Tommy, displaying his impressive collection of fangs. Tommy looked up at him with the kind of fearless curiosity that should have been a massive red flag to anyone with half a brain. "Actually, that's really cool. How do you keep the bones from decaying in the vacuum of space?" The question caught Krax so off guard that he actually answered, "We treat them with preserving chemicals. Formaldehyde. My mom uses something similar in her engineering work. She says it prevents molecular breakdown in extreme environments." And just like that, the apex predator of known space found himself having a casual conversation about preservation chemistry with his hostage. This should have been warning sign number 1. Now, the Vexthax had a very specific idea about how hostage situations were supposed to work. Step 1. Capture a helpless victim. Step 2. The victim cowers in terror. Step 3. The victim's family arrives in desperate panic. Step 4. Glorious hunt and trophy collection. It was a tried and true formula they'd used successfully across dozens of species. Tommy Martinez, however, had apparently never read the hostage handbook. Instead of cowering, he spent the first day asking questions. Lots of questions. The kind of questions that 8-year-olds are famous for, except these particular questions had a tendency to expose exactly how little the apex predators actually knew about their own technology. "So, this is your primary weapons array?" Tommy asked, peering at the control panel with genuine interest. "Why do you have 17 different targeting systems for basically the same function?" Zog puffed up with pride. "Multiple redundancies make us unstoppable in combat. But doesn't that just create 17 different points of failure? My dad always says redundancy only works if the backups aren't more complicated than the original system." The silence that followed was the sound of a military doctrine having an existential crisis. "And this navigation system," Tommy continued, because apparently he was just getting started. "Why does it take 47 steps to plot a hyperspace jump? The human ships I've been on do it in like 5. Our way is the traditional way," Crack scrawled, but there was a note of defensiveness creeping into his voice. "Proven over millennia of successful hunts." "Oh, I'm not criticizing," Tommy said quickly, with the innocent tone that every parent in the galaxy knows means trouble is coming. "I'm just curious about the engineering philosophy. It's so thorough, which in 8-year-old speak translates roughly to unnecessarily complicated and probably stupid." By day 2, something interesting started happening. The Vexthax warriors, despite their fearsome reputation, began actually enjoying their conversations with Tommy. Here was someone who seemed truly impressed by their achievements, who asked thoughtful questions about their culture and technology. It was refreshing, really. Most of their captives just screamed a lot. "You know," Tommy said during one of these chats, "I bet I could help make some of these systems more efficient. I'm pretty good with computers." Now, any species with a functioning sense of self-preservation would have immediately recognized this as the kind of offer that ends with their ship drifting powerless through space. But the Vexthax had spent so long being the scariest things in any given room that they'd forgotten what actual danger looked like. "You?" Zog laughed. "A pink grub child? What could you possibly know about superior Vexthax technology?" "Well, it helped my mom rebuild our home computer network last month," Tommy said modestly. "And I've been programming since I was 6. But you're probably right. Your systems are way too advanced for me. Hook, line, and sinker." Within hours, Tommy had been given access to what the Vexthax considered non-critical systems: environmental controls, food synthesizers, basic diagnostics, that sort of thing. Nothing that could actually damage the ship or compromise their security. At least, that's what they thought. Tommy started small. He convinced them that he was trying to improve efficiency by streamlining some of the more redundant processes. The Vexthax warriors watched indulgently as the little human tapped away at various control panels, making what appeared to be minor adjustments. "This is actually really interesting," Tommy commented as he worked. "Your food synthesizer has all these safety protocols to prevent contamination, but they're running in parallel instead of in sequence. If I just adjust this parameter here and redirect this subroutine there, you see," Crack said to his crew, feeling rather magnanimous. "The pink grub appreciates superior Vexthax engineering. Perhaps humans are not completely worthless after all." The first sign that maybe, just maybe, they had made a tiny miscalculation came during the evening meal. The food synthesizer, which had been producing perfectly adequate warrior rations for decades, suddenly started creating something that looked like gray pudding and tasted like what you'd get if disappointment could be liquefied. Tommy said, studying the unappetizing slop with professional interest. "Looks like there might be a calibration issue with the protein matrix. I can probably fix that tomorrow." But somehow, the fix Tommy implemented seemed to make things slightly worse. The food became progressively more inedible, the temperature controls began fluctuating randomly, and the artificial gravity began experiencing what Tommy called minor gravitational inconsistencies. By the end of day 2, the mighty Vexthax warriors were floating around their ship like confused balloons, trying to choke down meals that resembled and tasted like recycled boot leather, while their helpful little prisoner continued making improvements to their systems. And Tommy was having the time of his life. Now, while Tommy was busy turning the screaming death into a floating disaster zone, His parents were having their own kind of fun back on the disabled transport ship. And by fun, I mean the kind of cold, calculating rage that makes supernovas look like birthday candles. See, the Vexthax had made their second major miscalculation of this whole debacle. They assumed that humans, being relatively new to the galactic community and generally non-aggressive, would respond to the kidnapping of their child with the standard parental playbook: panic, desperation, maybe some futile concessions. What they got instead was Maria Martinez, senior systems engineer for Terran Deep Space Operations, and Jack Martinez, retired Terran Special Forces, sitting in the flickering emergency lighting of their damaged ship, and planning something that would make war crimes look like parking violations. 3 days, Maria said, her voice so level it could have been used to calibrate precision instruments. She was already pulling up schematics on her portable workstation, fingers flying across holographic interfaces. They gave us 3 days. Jack was cleaning his sidearm with the kind of methodical precision that suggests violence is not just possible, but inevitable. More than we need, he replied calmly. I can have a strike team here in 18 hours. Make it 12. I'm tracking their engine signature. Now, here's something the galaxy hadn't quite figured out about humans yet. We are absolutely terrifying when our children are in danger. Not scary in the traditional sense, like the Vexthax with their roaring and posturing. Scary in the way that precision engineering is scary. Scary in the way that calculated, methodical, inevitable consequences are scary. The ransom message came through on the second day, exactly as Krax had planned. A holographic projection of the massive alien leader appeared in their damaged cabin, all teeth and menace and theatrical intimidation. Soft-skinned parents, Krax rumbled, clearly enjoying himself. Your cub is unharmed for now, but our traditional hunting rituals begin soon. Bring yourselves to these coordinates if you wish to die with honor defending your spawn. He probably expected tears, maybe begging, some desperate negotiation attempts. Instead, Maria looked up from her console and said in the same tone she might use to discuss the weather, "You have 12 hours to return our son unharmed to the exact coordinates where you found us. After that, we stop being reasonable." Krax blinked his eyes in confusion. You dare threaten the mighty Vexthax? Jack stepped into the hologram's view, and somehow, despite being less than half the alien size and armed with nothing more than a standard-issue sidearm, he managed to project more menace than the 8 feet tall apex predator. Not a threat, a professional courtesy. 12 hours. The transmission cut off, leaving Krax staring at empty space and trying to figure out what had just happened. This wasn't how prey species were supposed to behave. Where was the fear, the desperation, the satisfying tears? Perhaps, Zog suggested carefully, they are simply in shock. Denial is a common response to traumatic situations. Yes, Krax agreed, though something about the interaction left him feeling oddly unsettled. Shock. They will realize their helplessness soon enough. Meanwhile, Maria had already pinged the emergency beacon that connected her directly to Terran Defense Command. The conversation that followed was brief, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its efficiency. Command, this is Maria Martinez, TD-7745. My son has been taken by hostiles. I need a full tactical extraction team at the following coordinates. Ma'am, extraction teams require formal authorization from Sector Command. That process typically takes 72 to 96 hours. Let me be more specific, Maria said, and her voice carried the kind of authority that comes from years of keeping multi-billion credit space installations from exploding. My 8-year-old son has been kidnapped by aliens who think humans are easy prey. You have 2 choices. Get me that extraction team in the next 10 hours, or explain to the media why Terran Defense Command refused to help rescue the first human child taken by hostile aliens. There was a pause, then, "Ma'am, I'm patching you through to Admiral Chen's direct line. The thing about humans that the galaxy was still learning is that we don't just have individual rage. We have institutional rage, trending rage, the kind of systematized, organized, well-funded rage that can move mountains, redirect asteroids, and turn peaceful exploration vessels into impromptu military strike forces. Within 6 hours, Jack's old unit had been activated for special operations duty. Within 8 hours, the transport ship had been repaired by a Terran engineering crew that materialized out of hyperspace like very helpful ghosts. Within 10 hours, Maria had somehow hacked into the Vexthax ship's communication array and was tracking their exact position in real time. The Screaming Death, meanwhile, was still experiencing what Tommy cheerfully described as minor technical difficulties. "I don't understand it," Zog complained as he floated past the command deck upside down, because the gravity generators couldn't decide which way was up anymore. How can one small pink grub cause so much chaos? Krax, who was trying to choke down something the food synthesizer claimed was nutritious protein paste but looked suspiciously like liquefied despair, had no answer. But he was starting to suspect that maybe, just maybe, they had underestimated exactly what species they were dealing with. By day 3, Tommy had transformed from a helpful little prisoner into what could only be described as a one-child wrecking crew with a smile. The amazing thing wasn't the scale of destruction he was causing. It was how he managed to make it all look like innocent curiosity mixed with minor technical glitches. Good morning, Krax, Tommy called out cheerfully as the Vexthax leader drifted past the main console, currently experiencing what the ship's computer helpfully described as directional gravity confusion. "I think I figured out that calibration problem with the food synthesizer." Krax, who had spent the last 2 hours trying to eat something that tasted like despair mixed with regret, perked up hopefully. "You did?" "Yep. The protein matrix was running too hot, so I adjusted the thermal regulators and recalibrated the molecular assembly parameters. Should be much better now." What Tommy didn't mention was that his adjustment involved cross-referencing the food synthesizer's chemical database with the ship's cleaning supply inventory. Technically, the protein matrix was no longer running too hot. Instead, it was now producing meals that were nutritionally complete, perfectly edible, and happened to taste exactly like industrial floor cleaner. The first Vexthax warrior to try the new and improved rations immediately began making sounds that suggested his vocal cords were filing for divorce from his throat. The second warrior, thinking his colleague was just being dramatic, took an even bigger bite and promptly started what appeared to be an interpretive dance routine titled, "Why Did I Think That Was a Good Idea?" Tommy observed thoughtfully, watching the chaos unfold. "Maybe the recalibration needs some fine-tuning. I should probably adjust the flavor synthesis protocols too," which he did. By the end of the day, the food synthesizer was producing meals that looked appealing, smelled delicious, and tasted like what you'd get if disappointment could be weaponized. The Vexthax warriors were starting to lose weight, which would have been concerning if they weren't currently dealing with what Tommy called minor environmental system fluctuations. The temperature controls had been Tommy's masterpiece of passive-aggressive engineering. He convinced the warriors that their thermoregulation system was inefficiently cycling and could be optimized for better energy conservation. What he'd actually done was reprogram the environmental controls to randomly select temperatures from across the entire spectrum of the technically survivable. One moment, the ship would be a comfortable 72°F. The next moment, it would suddenly spike to 98°F with humidity that makes breathing feel like drowning in hot soup. Then, without warning, it would plummet to 45°F with air so dry it made their scales crack. "This is normal during the optimization process," Tommy assured them, as Zog tried to figure out why he was simultaneously sweating and shivering. "The system needs to test all the parameters before it can find the most efficient settings. Should stabilize in a few days." The artificial gravity situation had evolved from minor inconsistencies to what could only be described as physics having a nervous breakdown. Tommy had managed to convince the ship's computer that the gravity generators needed to dynamically adjust based on the crew's movement patterns to maximize energy efficiency. What this meant in practice was that the ship's gravity field had developed a personality disorder. Walking toward the command deck meant experiencing 1.5 times normal gravity, making every step feel like trudging through cosmic molasses. The mess hall, on the other hand, had roughly Mars-level gravity, which meant that every time someone tried to eat, their food would float away mid-bite. The sleeping quarters randomly switched between zero gravity and double gravity every few hours, ensuring that the warriors were either floating around like confused balloons or getting squashed into their bunks like intergalactic pancakes. But Tommy's real masterpiece was what he'd done to the navigation system. "Your hyperspace plotting algorithm is really sophisticated," he told them on day 2, studying the navigation console with apparent admiration. "But I noticed it's recalculating the same stellar position data over and over again. That's probably wasting processing power." What Tommy had actually noticed was that the Vexthax navigation system had a backup verification protocol that double-checked every calculation against known stellar positions. It was a safety feature designed to prevent ships from accidentally jumping into stars or black holes. Very sensible. Very important for continued existence. Tommy had disabled it. Not obviously, of course. He'd simply redirected the verification subroutines to check against what he told them was an updated stellar cartography database that he'd helpfully uploaded from his mom's engineering files. Except the database he'd uploaded wasn't stellar cartography at all. It was his collection of video game high scores. The result was that the Screaming Death's navigation computer was now trying to plot hyperspace jumps based on Tommy's performance in Asteroid Blaster 3000 and his completion times for Super Space Racer, which meant that instead of heading toward deep space hunting grounds, they were slowly, but inexorably drifting toward the most dangerous region of local space, a binary pulsar system surrounded by a debris field of collapsed neutron matter. Tommy, Nog said on the third evening, studying the navigation display with growing concern. "Are you sure this course is correct? It looks like we're heading toward the shredder system." Tommy looked at the display with innocent confusion. "That's weird. Let me check the navigation parameters." He tapped a few keys with the focused intensity of a child trying to look helpful. "Oh, I see the problem. There's a small error in the coordinate calculation matrix. I can fix that." Which he did, by making the error slightly worse and adding 2 new ones. "There we go," Tommy announced proudly. "Should be much more accurate now." The navigation computer, now thoroughly convinced that the safest route through space involved flying directly through a region where matter got compressed into exotic particles, helpfully adjusted their course to arrive at the shredder system approximately 6 hours ahead of schedule. By the end of day 3, the mighty Vexthax hunting vessel was limping through space with failing life support, inedible food, gravity that couldn't make up its mind about which direction was down, and navigation systems that thought the best possible destination was cosmic suicide. And through it all, Tommy Martinez sat in their makeshift brig, cheerfully asking questions, offering helpful suggestions, and expressing genuine amazement at Vexthax engineering capabilities. "You know," he told Krax as the warrior leader floated past upside down, trying to drink something that looked like soup but tasted like industrial solvent. "I'm really learning a lot about advanced alien technology. My parents are going to be so excited when I tell them about all this." Krax, who was beginning to suspect that letting the small human anywhere near their ship systems might have been a mistake, could only grunt in response. Speaking required too much energy, and he needed to conserve what little strength he had left for the increasingly difficult task of not dying from his own ship's life support systems. The Screaming Death continued its inexplicable drift toward the shredder system, its crew slowly starving on technically edible, but practically indigestible food, while Tommy Martinez hummed quietly to himself and planned his next helpful improvement. The first sign that the Vexthax's day was about to get significantly worse came when their long-range sensors, which Tommy had helpfully optimized to filter out background cosmic noise, suddenly started screaming warnings about incoming ships. Multiple ships, moving very fast and broadcasting what the computer politely translated as extremely hostile intentions. "Cracks," Zog called out from the sensor station, his voice cracking with what might have been panic. He was currently experiencing the gravity generator's evening mood swing, which meant he was pressed against the ceiling at roughly twice normal gravity. We have contacts. 3. No. 5. Wait. 7 ships incoming on attack vectors. Krax, who was attempting to consume his morning meal, while floating sideways thanks to the ship's ongoing, directional confusion, immediately spit out what the food synthesizer claimed was traditional warrior protein paste, but tasted like liquefied regret mixed with floor polish. Impossible, he roared, though the effect was somewhat diminished by the fact that he was currently upside down. The soft skins are peaceful. They don't even have proper warships. Tommy looked up from the engineering console, where he'd been making what he called minor efficiency adjustments to their weapons targeting system. Oh, you mean my parents? Yeah, they're probably pretty upset about the whole kidnapping thing. Your parents? Zog squeaked, still plastered to the ceiling like an oversized gecko. Those were just 2 soft skins in a transport ship. Well, yeah, Tommy said, with the casual tone that 8-year-olds use when explaining something incredibly obvious to incredibly stupid adults. But my mom's a senior engineer for Terran deep space operations, and my dad used to be special forces. They know people. The incoming fleet was impressive indeed, though calling it a fleet was somewhat generous. What Maria and Jack Martinez had assembled in less than 12 hours was more accurately described as whatever happened to be in the neighborhood and could be convinced to help rescue a human child. Leading the formation was the TSV Righteous Fury, a Terran patrol corvette that had been conducting routine border surveys, until Admiral Chen personally called the captain and explained that there was a human child in danger, and that failure to assist would result in the captain spending the rest of his career cataloging asteroid compositions in the Outer Rim. Flanking it were 2 Terran merchant vessels whose captains had volunteered their ships the moment they heard about the situation. Because apparently never mess with human children has become a universal constant, even humans themselves were still figuring out. The real surprise was the 3 ships bringing up the rear, a Centauri science vessel, an Altarian diplomatic courier, and even a heavily armed Regalian trader. Word of the kidnapping had spread through subspace communications faster than a computer virus, and it seemed like every species that had ever had positive contact with humans suddenly felt obliged to help. "This is Captain Sarah Blake of the Terran vessel Righteous Fury," came the transmission, and even through the universal translator, her voice carried the kind of calm, professional menace that suggested very bad things were about to happen to someone. "You are currently in possession of stolen Terran property. You have 30 seconds to surrender unconditionally, or we will demonstrate why humans are considered the most dangerous species in this galaxy when our children are threatened." Krax, who had managed to orient himself right side up just in time to receive this message, felt his 4 heart skip several beats. 30 seconds? But we are the mighty Vexthax. We do not surrender to anyone. 25 seconds, Captain Blake continued helpfully. Prepare weapons. Fire all weapons. Krax bellowed to his crew, of whom were still struggling with the ship's gravity issues. Show these soft skins what true warriors can do. This would have been an excellent plan if Tommy hadn't spent the last 3 days improving their weapon systems. While the Vexthax had been distracted by their ongoing battles with inedible food and psychotic gravity generators, Tommy had been very busy optimizing their targeting computers. He had explained to them that their weapons were wasting energy by using outdated targeting algorithms, and that he could improve their accuracy by streamlining the computational matrix. What he'd actually done was reprogram their targeting system to aim at whatever was broadcasting the strongest electromagnetic signature within sensor range, which at the moment happened to be the Screaming Death Zone engine core. "Fire all weapons," Krax commanded. The Vexthax's array, consisting of 12 heavy plasma cannons and 16 particle beam projectors, all swiveled toward their targets with mechanical precision, locked on with perfect accuracy, and opened fire on their own ship. The next few seconds were what military historians would later describe as impressively catastrophic. The Screaming Death, already weakened by 3 days of Tommy's helpful improvements, began experiencing what could charitably be called rapid and scheduled disassembly. Primary power systems exploded in showers of sparks. Secondary systems caught fire. The artificial gravity generators, finally freed from their constant struggle with Tommy's modifications, gave up entirely and shut down, leaving the entire crew floating in zero gravity while their ship tore itself apart around them. "What's happening?" Zog screamed as he tumbled through the air, watching his mighty warship commit elaborate suicide. "I think there might be a small calibration issue with the targeting system," Tommy helpfully observed, somehow managing to look completely unfazed by the chaos erupting around him. "I can probably fix that if you want. Do not touch anything else." Every surviving Vexthax warrior screamed simultaneously, but it was far too late for that. The screaming death was already broadcasting automatic distress signals. Its hull was breached in 17 different places, and the engine core was making the kind of ominous humming noise that universally translates to, "You have about 90 seconds to abandon ship before everything in a 3-kilometer radius gets converted to high-energy plasma." Captain Blake's voice came through the comm system again, and if anything, she sounded even less amused than before. "This is your final warning. Surrender immediately, or prepare to be boarded by very angry humans." Krax, floating helplessly in the wreckage of his command center while emergency klaxons wailed and automatic systems announced that everything was broken, finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't just kidnapped a human child, he had kidnapped the human child, the first human child taken by hostile aliens. The symbolic representation of humanity's most protective instincts. The focal point for every aggressive impulse that humans had spent centuries learning to control. And now, those impulses were bearing down on him in the form of 7 very fast, very well-armed ships, crewed by beings who had apparently decided that the Vexthax needed to learn a lesson about the consequences of threatening human offspring. "We surrender," Krax bellowed into his comm system as another explosion rocked his dying ship. "We surrender completely. The human cub is unharmed." "Too late for that," came Captain Blake's reply. "Boarding teams are already en route. Do not resist. Do not move. And try very hard not to give us any excuse to demonstrate what humans do to child kidnappers." Through the failing viewports of the screaming death, Krax could see the sleek forms of Terran assault shuttles detaching from the larger ships, moving with the kind of precise coordination that speaks of millions of hours of training and an unlimited budget for things that explode. Tommy, meanwhile, had managed to find an intact comm panel and was cheerfully waving at the approaching shuttles. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I'm okay. You should see what I did to their ship. It's been really educational." The last thing Krax heard before the boarding teams arrived was Tommy explaining to someone over the comm that he'd learned a lot about alien engineering and that he was pretty sure he could build a better food synthesizer when they got home. Then the airlocks exploded inward, and Krax discovered exactly why humans were considered the most terrifying species in the galaxy when their children were in danger. The boarding action that followed was less a military operation and more a masterclass in controlled violence. The Terran Special Forces team, led by Jack Martinez himself, moved through the crippled Vexthax ship with the kind of precision surgery that makes professional soldiers wake up in cold sweats. They didn't roar or posture or make dramatic speeches about vengeance. They simply moved from room to room, efficiently neutralizing any Vexthax warrior who so much as twitched in a way that could be interpreted as threatening, while their portable scanners methodically located every life sign on the ship. The whole operation took exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. By the time it was over, 12 of the galaxy's most feared predators were zip-tied, sedated, and floating in the ship's corridor like oversized, very unhappy balloons. Tommy, meanwhile, was having a reunion that would have been heartwarming if it weren't taking place in the wreckage of an alien warship that had recently attempted suicide. Tommy, Maria Martinez floated through the damaged airlock, moving in the zero gravity with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years working in space. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine, Mom," Tommy grinned, somehow managing to look completely unruffled despite being surrounded by sparking electronics and the lingering smell of burned alien flesh. "Actually, it was kind of fun." Did you know their navigation system was trying to compensate for gravitational variance using a 30,000-year-old star chart? No wonder they couldn't plot efficient hyperspace jumps. Jack Martinez, still in full tactical gear, and looking like the kind of person you really didn't want to meet in a dark alley, swept his son into a hug that managed to be both gentle and somehow terrifying to anyone watching. "We were worried about you, kiddo." "I wasn't worried," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "I knew you'd come get me. Besides, I was learning lots of stuff about alien engineering." Did you know they were using 17 different targeting protocols for the same weapons array? That's just asking for cascade failures in the computational matrix. Captain Blake, who had arrived with the second wave of boarders, was studying the wreckage around them with professional interest. "Martinez, what exactly did your son do to this ship? Our engineers are saying the damage patterns don't match any known weapons signatures." "Oh, I just helped them optimize their systems," Tommy explained cheerfully. "Their food synthesizer was really inefficient, and their gravity generators were wasting tons of power. And don't even get me started on their navigation algorithms. I think I managed to improve pretty much everything." Which was when Cracks, still zip-tied and floating near what used to be his command console, finally found his voice. "Improve?" he croaked, his four eyes focusing on the small human with something approaching horror. You destroyed everything. Our mighty warship is ruined." Tommy looked truly confused by this assessment. "I didn't destroy anything. I just made your systems more efficient. Well, except for the weapons targeting system. That one was actually working fine. I just redirected the target acquisition protocols to focus on the strongest local electromagnetic signature, which happened to be your own engine core. That was more of an accident, really." "Accident?" Crax's voice reached frequencies normally reserved for emergency broadcasts. "Accident? Well, yeah, I mean, I was trying to make your weapons more accurate, but I didn't realize you'd actually try to use them while I was still calibrating the target parameters. That's kind of a basic safety violation in engineering work." The silence that followed was the sound of a predatory species having an existential crisis. Captain Blake cleared her throat. "So, to be clear, an 8-year-old human child single-handedly disabled your entire ship using nothing but helpful suggestions and basic engineering knowledge." "He is not a mere child," Zod protested weakly from his position near what used to be the sensor array. "He is some kind of demon, a creature of pure malevolence, disguised as an innocent grub." "Nah," Jack said casually, ruffling his son's hair. "He's just curious about how things work. Tommy's been taking apart electronics and putting them back together since he was 4. Last year, he rebuilt our home automation system because he thought it wasn't efficient enough." "Did it work?" Captain Blake asked, though she seemed to already know the answer. "Oh, it worked great," Maria confirmed. "Cut our power consumption by 30% and improved response time by half. Of course, it also started ordering groceries based on our eating schedules and automatically adjusted the house temperature based on our biometric readings. Took us a week to figure out how to turn off the helpful suggestions feature." Tommy looked slightly embarrassed. "I was trying to make it more user-friendly." "Right," Captain Blake said slowly. "Well, I think we've learned something important today about the dangers of underestimating human children." She turned to address the surviving Vexthax, her voice taking on the formal tone used for official military communications. "By the authority of the Terran Defense Command and in accordance with Galactic Treaty Regulation 847 CD regarding the unlawful detention of sentient juveniles, you are hereby charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and threatening conduct toward a minor. You will be transported to the nearest galactic court facility for processing." Cracks, who still couldn't quite process how his perfect predatory plan had resulted in total disaster, managed one last protest. But we are the mighty Vexthax. We are apex predators. How can we be defeated by a single small pink grub?" Tommy, who was now examining one of the alien weapons with professional interest, looked up at this. "Oh, that's easy. You guys are really good at hunting and fighting and all that scary stuff. But you're not very good at engineering." Your whole ship was held together by redundant systems and tradition instead of efficient design. All I had to do was streamline things a little bit, and everything started working way better. Well, better from an engineering perspective. Maybe not so much from a keeping the ship functional perspective." He paused thoughtfully. "Plus, you were really bad at asking the right questions. Like, when someone offers to help improve your systems, you should probably ask them to explain exactly what they're going to change before you let them start modifying critical infrastructure. That's just basic project management." And with that casual observation, 8-year-old Tommy Martinez delivered the final blow to the Vexthax collective ego. They weren't just defeated by a human child, they were defeated by a human child who is now giving them constructive feedback on their failure. An hour later, as the rescue fleet prepared to depart, Tommy was in the observation deck of the Righteous Fury, watching the slowly tumbling wreckage of the screaming death drift toward the shredder system. "Kind of sad, really," he commented to his parents. "It was actually a pretty impressive ship once you got past all the unnecessary complications. With some proper engineering, could have been really efficient. Maybe next time they'll think twice before kidnapping human children," Maria said, though her tone suggested she thought there wouldn't be a next time for this particular group of aliens. "Oh, definitely," Tommy agreed. "I think they learned a lot about human engineering principles." He turned to his dad. "Hey Dad, do you think I can keep one of those plasma rifles? I want to see how the particle acceleration matrix works." Jack Martinez looked at his son, then at his wife, then back at his son. "We'll talk about it when you're older." "How much much older?" Meanwhile, the story of the Vexthax's spectacular failure was already spreading through subspace communications networks across the galaxy. Within days, it would become the stuff of legend. The mighty predators who were defeated by a helpful 8-year-old human who just wanted to make their spaceship more efficient. And in the deepest, darkest corners of the galaxy, where the most dangerous predators gathered to share stories of their conquests, a new rule was quietly added to the universal hunting code. Under no circumstances mess with human offspring. They are not as helpless as they appear, and their parents are absolutely terrifying. The Vexthax, meanwhile, spent their court hearing trying to explain to a panel of judges how their mighty warship had been destroyed by what they still insisted was malevolent optimization carried out by a demon disguised as a small pink grub. The judges were not particularly sympathetic to this defense. Tommy Martinez returned to his normal life of school, homework, and taking apart household electronics to see how they worked. But sometimes, late at night, he would look up at the stars and wonder what other alien technologies he might encounter someday. And somewhere in the depths of space, alien predators who heard the story would shiver and make a mental note to give human ships a very wide berth. Because the galaxy had learned an important lesson. Never, ever mess with human children. Not because they're helpless, but because they're human children, which means they're curious, intelligent, and absolutely fearless when it comes to improving things that don't need improvement. And their parents will burn down half the galaxy to get them back.